Yeah, it's live now. You can start the program.
Yes. Good afternoon, one and all. I welcome everyone for today's webinar on National Education Policy 2020 and Future of the Indian Higher Education System. Let's have a great session. Let's start the session with invoking ourselves with a prayer song.
Namo Arihantram Namo Siddhanam Namo Ayariyanam Namo Uvajjayanam Namo Loye Savvasahunam Eso Panchanamukkaro Savva Pavapanasano Mangalanancha Savvesi Padhamam Havai Mangalam
நீராறும் கடலொடுத்த நிலமடந்து எழிலொழுகும் சீராரும் வதனமென திகழ்வரத கண்டமிழே எக்கணமும் அதிசிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாளும் தக்க சிறு பிறை முதலும் தரித்தனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிழமை திறம் திகழ்ந்து செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
Let the universe bless everyone. So, there was a great saying by Mahatma Gandhi, and education is an all-around drawing, the best in child, body, mind, and soul. To make this quote true, our Ministry of Education introduced National Education Policy 2020. We were about to know it shortly from our presenter. To go to the session, now I welcome Dr. N. Sujata, Vice Principal and Head Department of Corporate Secretary, to proceed welcome address. Suja ma'am. Suja ma'am, there was a technical issue.
Am I audible, Sudha?
Yes, Suja ma'am, you're audible. Yes.
Thank you. Work hard in silence. Let your success be your noise. So with this a wonderful thought, good afternoon and a warm welcome. We, Sri Chandra Prabhu Jain College, meet you, Department of Commerce and the Economic, jointly organizing a national webinar on National Educational Policy 2020 and the future of the higher education system. For the current topic at the current time to enhance our knowledge of future perspectives in the education field. I take immense pleasure in welcoming our College Secretary, Sri Lalit Kumar O. Jain, and our beloved Principal, Dr. V. Nakajoti, and our management members in this occasion. I am very much happy to welcome the chief guest of this wonderful program, Dr. Pradeep Kumar Chaudhary, Zahir Hussain, Center for Education Studies, School of Social Sciences, JNU, New Delhi. Greetings to you, sir. This is our honor to have you here for this wonderful program. A warm welcome welcome for the departments and the faculty members and the organizing committee, and for having Sir, I'm sorry for the technical issues we are facing, sir. But anyhow, as our vice principal said, the topic was really a current one, and we really honored to have you here to discuss about it, sir. Welcome once again to our college through online mode. Okay. To proceed to presidential address, I request Dr. V. Nagajodi, our principal, to follow the presidential address. Sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the management, on behalf of me, and on behalf of Vice Principal Ma'am and all the heads and the staff members, I cordially invite all of you for this wonderful session on National Education Policy 2020, which is going to be addressed by Dr. Pradeep Kumar Chaudhary, and he is an expert in this particular area. And the need for this particular topic is the need of that, because all of us, we know, and if you take note that all over the world, there are a lot of things are happening, and there are a large number of innovations are coming up, and the creativity has been taken up in a very big way, and a lot of challenges that we are facing in technological front. So therefore, this is the right time for all of us to join together, and in order to improve the high quality of education, particularly in higher education institutions. So first of all, let me express my sincere thanks to our secretary, Mr. Lalit Kumar O. James G, and as well as our chairman, as well as our co-secretary, particularly for giving this wonderful opportunity to conduct this new education policy webinar today in our college. To benefit, what are the advantages that we are having in implementing this NEP 2020 all over the world, and particularly for this part of India, and particularly in what way it is going to help to our rural students and those who are coming from middle income group and as well as lower income group, to whom our college is particularly catering. And particularly now when we see about the value systems, it has started eroding day by day. And similarly is the case with the curriculum what we are teaching. And we have to upgrade our curriculum. That's what has been mentioned in the NEP 2020. And similarly, there are a large number of challenges are there in front of our youngsters to compete with global level. So when you want to aim for this global level education to bring into India, this is the right time for us to gear up to implement the National Education Policy 2020 in a very big way. And there is an expert, Dr. Pradeep Kumar Chaudhary, is with us right here, and he is going to give the excellent presentation today for the benefit of our students and as well as those who are watching from all over the world about this particular webinar. So with these few words, I will hand over this session to Sudha Vaishnav ma'am. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, sir. As our principal said, since July, as the new education policy is announced by government, we are all curious to know about it in detail, sir, actually. Even as a professor, I am so nervous to know how it's going to impact all the people's life and the students' life in future. So it's a really good current topic, sir. So to know about the resource person, I would like to call Dr. R. Rajesh Khanna, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics. Sir?
Very good afternoon, sir. Very good afternoon to all of you. Dr. Pradeep Kumar Chaudhary teaches economics at the Jagir Regional Center of Educational Studies, School of Social Science, Jawaharlal University, New Delhi. Before joining JNU, he worked as a regular faculty at the Institute of Studies in Industrial Development, the Research Institute of the ICSR Government of India, and as a research fellow at Public Health Foundations of India and the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi. His PhD is in the area of economics of education from National Institute of Educational Planning and Administrative, New Delhi. Pradeep research interested spans a wide range of issues of education and development economics. These specific research interested include education skill and labor market, privatization of education and market policies, school choice, educational inequality, family investment in education. Currently, he is collaborating in a major project titled Effective Education, Daily Research Implementation and Innovation Initiative, IIT Delhi, sponsored by Department of Social Science, Technology, Government of India. The study aims to increase the components of study students in analytical ability and critical thinking by involving them in research and innovations as well as to enhance their skill of employability in the long run. Recently, Pradeep completed an international collaborative study in an extremely setup with Stanford University, USA, that aims to assess and improve student learning in engineering and higher education. He is in an international comparative perspective. He has also completed two other studies sponsored by ICSSR and UGC that examine the issues of inequality in education opportunities among marginalized youth in India and the importance of financial incentives to bridge this. His edited volume co-author titled Constructional Educational Studies in India, Research Policy and Practice. He is forthcoming by Routledge India. Pradeep work has appeared in the journals like Proceedings of National Academic Science, ASEAN and Pacific Policy Studies, Economic and Political Weekly, Journals of Social Science, Millennial Asia, Quality Assurance in Education, Education for the Future, and also as chapter in edited books, reports published by Oxford University Press. Routledge and Springer, Dr. Chaudhary has traveled widely across the globe: UK, Canada, Germany, France, Netherlands, Hungary, Turkey, South Africa, Singapore, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, to share his research work in several international conferences, seminars, symposiums, and workshops, with the grant received from different development organizations. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Welcome to join us. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
It is really happy for us to have you, sir. Once again, I state this because it's really to know your profile, you're an eminent person. So I welcome you once again. Without taking any more time, I'm just handing over the session to you, sir. You can proceed.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon to all present here, who all are to whom I can see in this platform. Otherwise, the others who are also watching, as principals are told, through YouTube channel. Wish you all a happy new year. Hope this new year will bring happiness to all of us. We will be in the post-COVID era, and we all will be healthy and safe. I sincerely thank the principal and the college management for inviting me to speak on NEP 2020 and how it is going to impact the higher education system of the country. At the outset, let me congratulate the college and the entire management for organizing this timely event, as the roadmap for implementing the policy recommendation on NEP policy recommendation is at the peak. So the government is intervening on this and the recommendations are going on. So it's in the peak at this time, at this juncture. It is really important to organize such talks that will spread awareness on the policy document, as well as will provide some critical inputs to the policy document as well. My discussion in the next maybe 30 minutes or so that is given to me, that is divided into two parts. I will discuss the idea. In my idea I am trying to share will be in two parts. In the first part, I will spend some time on the expansion of higher education in India that you all see, and its some important or salient features which will provide a background reference to the issue that I am going to discuss in the second part, that is on NEP 2020 and how it is going to shape the higher education system of the country, or how the NEP 2020 is going to restructure the higher education sector of the country. As majority of the participants in the talk are students, maybe, I don't know, the first part of the discussion that I will give on higher education and development discourse, that will help to provide a clarity on the contemporary discourses on higher education and development, and how these issues that I am going to discuss in the first part having a policy relevance. So that's the point I am trying to make. That is first. So I will divide my talk into two parts. One is the higher education and development discourse, the new discourse that we generate in this discipline. And the second one is how that is linked with the National Education Policy 2020. Let me get into the part one, where I will discuss the discourse on higher education and development, particularly the recent discourse of the new discourse that is being emerged in the area of higher education and development. As we all know, education and specifically higher education plays a critical role in growth and development of any nation. Education, that you all know, shapes the destiny of a nation. That nobody can deny. That education plays a clear role in the growth and development, and also it shapes the destiny of any nation. That you all will agree. In the changing developmental discourse, if you see the changing developmental discourse, emphasis is being given on the role of higher education very clearly, because it helps on societal and economic development of the nation, and also play a critical role in shaping the well-being of its citizens. Because education plays a critical role in shaping or providing better life to all its citizens. That's nobody will doubt on this. Higher education is considered as a key instrument that we all say for building an equitable and just society. Because it reduces inequality, it reduces, there are several externalities to the higher education that is being discussed in the literature very clearly. Over the years, we see a better understanding of the pathways through which higher education leads development. Because higher education leads development, but the complexities that higher education is linked with development is being unfolded very clearly in the literature. Both in, because this is not only in academia literature, it is also being focused in the policy space. There is a new understanding, I would emphasize, there is a new understanding in recognizing the benefits and externalities that higher education renders to the society. This is in addition to direct economic benefits that higher education gives, which was highlighted in human capital theory long ago. In addition to that, it provides several other externalities as well. For instance, I would say a few examples. The role of higher education on women empowerment, the role of higher education on access, providing better health facilities, reducing crime, building better citizens, and so on and so forth. So there are several externalities that higher education produces. These issues were specifically highlighted with the emphasis on human development discourse. From the discourse that started in 1990s, particularly by economists like Amartya Sen, with the emphasis on human development perspective, these ideas were being emerged very clearly. The developmental, this is one set of idea that I am trying to put. The second set of idea that I am trying to put is the developmental discourse in the 21st century. If you see the developmental discourse that is emerging in 21st century has taken a new turn. What's the new turn is all about? We are referring. It is acknowledged that knowledge, it is very much acknowledged that knowledge, not capital, is the key to sustained economic growth and development. And also in human well-being. World Development Report, if you see 98-99 World Development Report that is titled as Knowledge for Development, I think students should refer it, Knowledge for Development, that is downloadable from World Bank's website, that had discussed the importance of knowledge to development and suggest that developing countries must take to narrowing the knowledge gaps. It's not about understanding the education in a very narrow sense, but rather understanding the role of education in a broader sense. That's the reason the World Development Report of the World Bank clearly say developing countries must invest in narrowing the knowledge gaps or narrowing the inequality in knowledge. Here we see the specific role of higher education in the changing social and economic orders, because the social and economic orders are changing over the years, and where higher education in this context, higher education plays a very critical role. Therefore, in a competitive knowledge global economy that we see today, the role of higher education is being increasingly felt. That nobody will doubt on that. Higher education is being considered, in many cases I have seen, higher education is being considered as the modern world's basic education. It's no more luxury, it is a basic education in the modern world today, the world we are leading today. There is growing aspiration for higher education among young Indians. If you see, the young Indians are getting into the higher education system, largely, particularly in the critical phase of demographic dividend that we see, that the country is passing through currently, because we are getting the highest young population to the population group. No, I don't think any other country is getting that advantages. The expansion of higher education in India has attracted new waves of lower income students. Lower income students that are those who are not able to get into the higher education system, they have started getting into higher education system. Because if you see in the post-colonial phase, higher education was largely elite in nature. So that elite higher education system is now transferred into a mass higher education system in the country. So the students from low economic background, marginalized sections of the society, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, Muslims, women, they all are getting into higher education system largely. The expansion of higher education in India had attracted them very clearly. Those groups who are not included at the initial time, but they are slowly being included. That helps them significantly. That helps them for their social mobility. As a result, higher education sector in India has experienced remarkable growth during the post-independence period, and more impressively during the last 4 to 5 decades. In such a way, it has increased in such a way that it becomes the second largest system in the world after China, and pushing US to the third place. Because the data says, the recent data. While the expansion of higher education sector has helped the country very clearly to reach a stage of massification that many have argued, including Tilak, Varghese, and several other educationists who work on higher education, they have clearly argued that we are in a stage of massification, which is to be celebrated. As an Indian, we should celebrate that. But it is equally important to analyze and identify the winners and losers in the system. Who all are getting into that the massification, and who all are not getting into those kind of taking the benefits of the massification of higher education system in the country, or the expansion that we see. Did the expansion of the system lead to widening access to higher education among underrepresented groups? I think principals are also told that how the whether the underrepresented groups like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and all other, are they getting into the higher education system at large number as we expect, given the massive expansion of higher education system? Or it has generated an inequality in the higher education system? That is a great question. We will come in. The latest NSSO data, National Sample Survey Organization data, reveals that 75th round that has recently come, 2017-18, that says rich households are represented 5 times higher than poor households in higher education. So if there are one child from poor category is getting into higher education, at the same time 5 children are getting from rich households. So 5 times their representation is higher. Urban-rural variations is significant. Though male-female gap is minimized in higher education, that you can see, but females are less represented in professional courses and technical courses like engineering, medicine, and not medicine exactly, but engineering more so. That is well known to everyone. Besides inequality in access to higher education in India, providing access to quality higher education is also another interesting thing, and another important concern that we see in the today's higher education system. Quality of higher education, because that is a serious concern. I can bring 2 cases that are often discussed in the academia and policy space. First one is engineering education. Engineering education, on which I work intensively, close to 80% of the engineering graduates are not employable in the market. That there are several surveys on that. So that clearly says that close to 80% are not employable. They are not gaining the skill that they are supposed to gain when they are getting a BTech degree. Several engineering colleges see significant decline in the enrollment, and in many cases, those colleges are turned into gymnasiums. Some of them are turned into supermarkets, private schools, and all that. So they are getting into several other business because their students are not getting. And I think it's also the true in Tamil Nadu, as I see statewide data also, that is very clearly the picture. In some cases, close to 50% of the total enrollment is not there. If the intake is 100, less than 50 are enrolling in the engineering. So that is the oversupply of engineers, and the quality has declined drastically. The other important example that comes to my mind immediately is the training imparted to teachers in teacher training colleges. That is found is seriously weak. The training is very seriously weak because the training that we impart in teacher training institutes are not up to the mark. Particularly in self-financing colleges or private colleges that are rampant in the states like Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh, and in many other states that is rampant. While taking admission in B.Ed course, I listened to one of the speakers at some point of time in a lecture that was organized by NIPA, where I did my PhD. There I just found that the person was saying, who is involved with the NCT and all, that institutes, when they enroll the students in BTech, they ask whether you are like to join the institute in attending group or non-attending group. So what is that? That means the college will ask you, if you are joining us in attending group, then you will pay less because you have to attend the class. If you are opting for non-attending category, then you need not to come to the classroom, but you will need to pay more. So as you will pay more, then you need not to come to the classroom and you will get the degree. So the kind of program that is running, these are some of the highlights that I am trying to give. I will come to some of these points clearly while I will interlink this with the NEP 2020 in the later part of my discussion. So now the question is, we have several problems. I highlighted a few of them: equity concerns, inequality in educational opportunity, quality concerns. So these are some of the major concerns that we see in the academia and policy space on higher education sector in the country. Now, how the NEP that we all are talking about, NEP 2020, that is there in front of us now, is going to address these issues and helps in reshaping the future of the Indian higher education system. That is the talk of the day. That how the issues that I just highlighted, few of them, I am not highlighting many because higher education has several issues. I am pointing out 3-4 issues. So I am trying to say that how these issues are being settled or are being discussed in the policy domain, that in NEP 2020. That is the point, and now I am getting into. That is the part 2 of my discussion. Let us get into that. I don't know actually the format of this. I hope that I will talk and then we will have question and answer. After 34 years of waiting, if you see, as the last national education policy that was approved in 86 with some modification in 1992, we got the taste of a new education policy. We all got as the citizens of the country. It is also the first education policy of the 21st century. That is being said many times. It is important to understand and debate on the NEP 2020 critically. As we know, education policy is central to the public policy discourse, because education policy has a magic power that actually linked with the several other public policy discourse in the country. So it's important to critically debate on the NEP 2020. And also it is important, the importance of critical debate on NEP 2020 also lies with the fact that we are leading towards a knowledge economy and welfare states. So there we see the critical role of education. I said about this in the first part as well. It is expected that, very clearly expected that NEP 2020 would provide a gateway for realizing the dream of a new and self-reliant India of the 21st century that we all are taking, Atmanirbhar Bharat, Skill India Mission, and several other policy domains that is being emphasized by the current government. So how this policy is going to reshape the new India that we are aspiring for in the next century. So there are two major components of a policy document. You go for any policy document, there are two major points that I want to bring in. First, what it suggests or recommends. What the policy recommends about let's say an education sector, what actually it recommends. That's point number one. Second one is how these recommendations are going to be implemented in the ground. These two are very linked. So what is being recommended and how it is being implemented. There are 2 points. To me, if I see this, to me, both are equally important. What is being recommended and how it is being implemented, both are equally important for me, because I want to give an instance for this. Why I say so? Because if we know that a wrong prescription of the doctor can be dangerous for a patient. If we give medicine based on that prescription. So first, the prescription should be correct. That's the recommendations. If we are getting into implementation, that is the giving medicine. So that is I consider as implementation. So implementation should also be equally important. It should also be seriously taken, also as well as the recommendations. Why I said this? Just I said that if you prescribe medicine based on the wrong prescription, then definitely there will be danger with the patient. Similar is the case. The recommendations should be critically looked at, and their implementation should also be critically looked at. The assumption that we make, usually in a policy document, the assumption that we make in this context is the recommendation of a policy document are based on wider consultations. Any policy document that we bring on any sector, that must be debated well before recommending, and that is expected. There should be critical debates on that, critical inputs from different stakeholders should come in, and therefore, in a normative sense, the recommendations made in the policy document is going to make a significant change or significant improvement in the education sector after it is being implemented. So in a normative sense, we are assuming that if the national education policy recommendations are being implemented in the ground, then definitely there will be an improvement in the policy, in the education sector. That's the expectation for all of us. Because we know how education policy is critical to the public policy debate and how it is actually rendering improvements in the education sector. Let us discuss what I will do now. Let us discuss some of the major recommendations made in NEP 2020 for higher education. And if these recommendations are implemented, then how, already some of them are started, so how that is going to shape the future of the Indian higher education system. So we'll get into some major recommendations, and then if those are implemented, how it is trying to shape the higher education system of the country. That is the major concern that I'm going to discuss. When I say major, I mean the issues that are in forefront of the academia and policy space. And of course, where I have a comparative advantages, I will get into those issues rather than all the issues that is being discussed in the policy document, because the issues that I am little comfortable also that I have taken up, and those are also equally important. I'm not saying that only my comparative advantages, rather those are being flourished in the platform or in several other documents or in the discourse that has come out very primarily. Let me get into one by one. I may discuss 3-4. First one I want to discuss is equity and inclusion in higher education. That is an important concern that we all are worried about. Equity and inclusion. The continuous decline in the public expenditure on education, that is government expenditure on education, has given greater space to the non-state sector, that is private sector in India. That is clear. Higher education is patronized as a marketable commodity that we all know currently. Particularly, that's the reason there is a massive expansion of higher education sector across the courses. Engineering, even in social sciences now coming in. So all other disciplines that is coming out, that involvement of private sector. Around 70% of the students in the country are enrolled in private higher education institutions. And we have close to more than 300 private universities in the entire country. The massive expansion of private higher education institutions has resulted in inequality in educational opportunity. That is an important concern for all of us, because the expansion of private higher education in the country, that well-off families are accessing those private higher education institutions, that is actually leading towards inequality in educational opportunity for several households or several students. Household expenditure, that is out-of-pocket expenditure that parents pay from their pocket to access higher education, has increased extensively. That has rapidly increased. The latest NSSO survey, again I am saying National Sample Survey 2017-18, reveals that annual average household expenditure on higher education as a percentage of the total income, or in NSSO we measure as total consumption expenditure, which is a proxy of family income, is around 20% in 2017-18. That means if you are sending your child to access higher education, on an average you will be spending 20% of your annual income on that. One child I am saying. And that expenditure is more than 50% in the disciplines like engineering, medicine and other technical courses. That means if you are sending a child to engineering, then on an average an Indian will spend 50% of his annual family income on one child. So that is rapidly increasing. Inequality between poor and rich is very high, I have said. Rich are 5 times more represented in higher education than poor. There is a huge rural-urban gap, gender gap. Gender gap has declined, but as I said, gender gap in choosing discipline is very high. There you will get only 20% of the total enrollment in engineering are women, rest 80% are men. There is a wide difference between scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and forward caste, Hindu and Muslim. So that difference is very clear. What would be so I want to question is, there are some improvements in this dimension, nobody denies to that. But what I am trying to put is, what would be the representation of the poor households living in rural area belong to a scheduled caste category. So what I am trying to say, even if there is a massive expansion of higher education sector in the country, what is the probability or what is the chance that a household whose child has crossed like past senior secondary 12th standard, but what is the chance that child who belongs to poor family, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, living in a rural area, what is the chance that child will get into the higher education system? Any higher education system? It's very low, really low. Can you see many students who are first generation learners, let's say whose parents are not educated, they belong to scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, living in a rural area, having all kind of difficulty. Do you think they can access IITs? Do you think they can access IIMs, Indian Institute of Management? Or they can access good central universities in the country? Or NITs, National Institute of Technology, or Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore? It's very, very difficult to expect, even after what we call 70 years of independence, close to 70 years of independence. So that's the kind of picture that we are emerging. There, equity is an important concept. And where I said about the inequality in educational opportunity, what we are trying to do, we are expanding the higher education system through private sector, which is again filling the aspiration of the middle class or elites. Very difficult to fill the aspiration of lower income households. And you can see that even elite public higher education institutions like IITs, IIM, Central University like ours, it's very difficult to get. There may be few like our university, for example. Many students from first generation learners are coming, so that these kind of universities are very less in number. That's the point I want to say. Now the question is how to include the excludes, because these are the excludes. How to include them? In this context, the target to achieve equity and inclusiveness in higher education in the NEP 2020 is well received. I really like, and many have said that this is an interesting point they have raised in the NEP 2020, that there should be equity in higher education, then inclusive, the higher education should be inclusive also. The document has listed several potential barriers to access higher education, this NEP document, among the students or socio-economically disadvantaged groups. It has categorized all of them into socio-economic disadvantaged group, SEDGs, and the need for student support mechanism. That is an interesting point. They have clearly mentioned that there is a need for student support mechanism. It has listed several steps that need to be taken by the state higher education institutions to overcome these. The most important one I found is financial assistance and scholarship to the needy students. That is a welcome step. But currently, if I saw the data, currently less than 1% of the total expenditure on higher education is spent on scholarship. If 100 rupees has budgeted for higher education, less than 1 rupee is being spent on scholarship. The expenditure on scholarship is very, very less by the government. So that needs actually a significant increase to bring these excludes into, or to include the excludes that I said. The government should come out with several scholarships for the students, even in the undergraduate level, I would say, because our scholarship now largely in the research level. We don't see much in undergraduate or postgraduate except post-metric and all, but we need a huge number of scholarships even in the undergraduate level. Majority of the students do not have access to the undergraduate level education, largely because they are not financially strong. Close to 80% of the students are accessing higher education in colleges. So colleges are there is a dialogue, no knowledge without college. So knowledge actually being generated in college because majority of the students are accessing colleges, higher education through colleges. So that is, I would say, an earmarked share of money should be kept for scholarships for college students. Until and unless you do that, it's very difficult to get the students in the higher education system and to minimize the inequality in educational opportunity. How to make the Indian higher education system inclusive? That is another important point. The issue of inclusion in higher education is becoming a complex issue now. The inclusion that we understand, let's say 20 years back, is not the kind of issue that we are seeing today. So it is complex, particularly with the inflow of students from lower socioeconomic strata. As I said, there are students now getting from low economic, some of the students are getting into the higher education system. That has made the system very complex. Complex in the sense, very heterogeneous in nature. The classroom is getting diversified. The classroom, let's say 10 years back, is not the classroom today, and posing several challenges for the teachers in teaching learning. These new developments in the higher education system are really the need of the hour. That is welcome. Let the students from lower income strata, they should get into the higher education system. But to turn that as an opportunity, there should be specific policy focus. Otherwise, they will be again excluded. For example, we see that scheduled tribe number has increased in the higher education institution, but what kind of problem they are facing once they are enrolled in higher education institution is an interesting issue. I don't think much is being said. What the literature says is what you call inequality in educational experiences. It's not about only access to education, it's beyond access. Once they are accessing to higher education institutions, what kind of problem they are facing in the classroom, in hostel, or somewhere else? Or are they mingled with the other peer groups or not is an also interesting issue. But policy focus in the inclusion on higher education that is there in NEP 2020 has not said about this. I don't see much discussion on this in the policy document, except laying down some broader point, such as making admission process, curriculum, or all that inclusive and all. How they are going to do is not clear to us. I'm getting into the second point, that is providing access to quality higher education through recruiting quality faculty, catalyzing quality academic research and all that, because quality is an important concept that we all know. I gave the example of I gave the example of engineering and all, but there are several other examples why quality is in trouble. As we all know, teachers play a critical role. I am getting into the teachers. So teachers play a very critical role in imparting quality higher education, that nobody disagree. Let me flag 2 points on this. First, the number of teachers required in different higher education institutions are they not there, because the requirement is very high, but actually there are very less number of teachers in the system. There are several studies and media reports that reveal that many universities and colleges do not have required number of teachers, including central universities, IITs, IIMs. There are some universities where a department is being managed by a single faculty. That is being there. I have seen, and also that is being reported in several places. Secondly, the quality of teacher, that is a number, but other thing is the quality of teacher is also, quality of teacher recruited in higher education institutions is not up to the mark in many universities and colleges. It's obvious that I would say that teachers recruitment is, in many cases, it's a scam that is being said. It's obvious that from poor quality higher education institutions, we may not get such quality teachers, because if we, until and unless we improve the higher education system quality, it's very difficult to get quality teachers. I wish to quote the findings of a study on engineering education that appeared in Hindu in 2016. They did a study, that's to specific authors, they did a study on engineering colleges, and they found that over 50,000 teachers, they are figured on rolls, or they are in the website as regular teacher in more than one institutions. That means the same fellow is being recruited 2 times, let's say in college A and college B, with full time. So there are many of these repetitions they found, and that was a serious issue at that point of time. That means if you see the situation that we are getting in. With the intervention of the ICT, information and communication technology, a job of a teacher is getting challenging nowadays. I think you all have experienced in this COVID time. And how the education system is going to address this kind of the new developments in the education sector is a serious concern. Are the teachers are ready for that? The recommendation of the NEP in this context, if you see 2020 on teacher issue, is not very clear. I went through and I didn't get any particular response or particular recommendation on that. Though it has mentioned about the changes it is going to make in the recruitment policies, on teacher training, for professional development of teachers. These are some of the things mentioned, but not very clear. It spells out some recommendations in general that I found, and lacking specific interventions. For instance, how the role of a teacher is changing over the years, and how the higher education system is going to handle this issue. As a way forward, I want to emphasize on 2 important points. First, producing good teachers from the system is very complex, and therefore it needs a set of interventions that are linked with each other. Until and unless we produce a quality secondary graduate from the school, it is difficult to produce a good teacher in higher education institutions. So we should strengthen the school education system as well. And I would say, as preparing teachers takes time, NEP 2020 should take this issue very seriously and with priority, training teachers. But being a young teacher, you and I think some of you are all here, being young teachers, I want to highlight that irrespective of all problems, a teacher can make a difference in the youth's mind in the classroom. That always welcome, and we have seen that how teachers have impacted the life of students. Once you are in the classroom, the space is yours. And you can do wonder in the classroom. That I think many teachers have done. And we have several such examples where teachers have done miracle. No doubt, conducive policy always helps to teach better and all that in the classroom, but a committed teacher can contribute even in the adverse situation. So that is also, as teachers, we should learn that even in the adverse situation also a teacher can do great. So that's the role of a teacher, that particularly the young teacher like us, we should do that. NEP 2020 recommends establishing the national, as per the research is concerned, I'm getting into that. NEP 2020 recommends establishing National Research Foundation, NRF, and the current budget, the recent budget that was presented in the parliament, allocated rupees 50,000 crore for 5 years for research. But our R&D spending, if you see, India's R&D spending, spending on research and development is only 0.6%. While it is 2.38% in USA, 4.2% in South Korea, even it is higher in China and all. This needs a substantial boost. But an important concern, how to develop a research culture in universities. Because research culture in universities is not in Indian context. There may be few elite universities who are doing good research. Many are not doing. In the college, almost research is absent. Where basic facilities are lacking. We have already existing bodies to foster research in the country, like we have ICSR for social science, Indian Council of Historical Research, Indian Council of Philosophical Research, Indian Council of Medical Research, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, etc. But why we are not succeeding to produce a good quality research atmosphere in universities? That's a great question. Weak linkage between industry and higher education institution is considered as an important barrier for this. that is there. Thus, substantial increase in public funding towards research and a better diagnosis of the problem needs to be done, which the NEP 2020 has not done actually in that context, I found. How much time I can spend? It's 45 minutes already. I have something more. I will get into, can we extend 5-10 minutes or is it very strict, the timing? Sir? Okay. Holistic and multidisciplinary higher education. That is another interesting point that has come out. Holistic and multidisciplinary higher education. NEP targets for a more holistic and multidisciplinary education. Gaining knowledge on specific fields that would help for all-round development of an individual. I want to raise few questions on this. Why we have failed to achieve this in the past, like on multidisciplinary research? Why this is found to be found to be a very successful model in Europe, USA, and many other developed countries, but not acceptable to many stakeholders in higher education system in the country, in India particularly, including the parents. The parents, if you see, they don't actually sign into multidisciplinary courses even today. I see the role of both administrative and socio-cultural factors for this. For instance, parents across the country have a clear preference towards engineering, medicine, and all other science courses, technical fields, and they see the liberal arts in a different perspective. Hierarchy of subjects. There is clear hierarchy of subjects in the higher education system and disciplines, which is again linked to labor market. Until and unless the structural difficulties are not being removed, see, looking multidisciplinary as a successful model is not possible in the country's context. That's actually the problem that we find. NEP has recommended to dismantle some of these rigidities that is there with the courses, but it's not an easy task. I would say it's not an easy task. It's not about changing the curriculum. It's not about changing the pedagogy and all that to some larger extent. Rather, developing a societal consciousness among the parents on this, working on the occupational rigidity. Why there is a rigidity in the occupation and all that also needs to be looked at. Without intervening on all this, that a kind of package that I am saying, the changes only in the curriculum will not bring multidisciplinary research in universities or multidisciplinary teaching. Then my next point is use of technology in teaching learning. That is, I think, all we know, and this is an interesting point. Teaching, and this is being emphasized in the NEP 2020 clearly. Before getting into the policy interventions that is there in NEP 2020 on on use of ICT in education or higher education in particular, let me give you some evidence on the access to technology, what we call a digital divide, what we call as digital divide. That there are several studies now also, and the discourse is at the peak because we are in the COVID time and teachers are taking classes through online gadget, and this talk is also we are able to do through that. But what are the problems in that? The NSSO data set, again I refer that because I do work on this data set, that half of the students accessing higher education in India do not have access to internet, close to 50%. And this figure is 70% among students accessing higher education from poor households. It is almost 70% of the students don't have access to gadgets. There is also a wide gap in access to internet among students of different social groups. 45% of the students from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and 45% of the students from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. No, sorry, I am saying 60% of the students from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, they do not have access to internet, which is not the case for general category. General category, they get better access, but these students do not get access. A case in Kerala, if you see in the peak time of COVID, that was highlighted in the media, that a girl climbed up to a tree to get good internet connectivity, that was highlighted in the media, to participate in the online classes. The problem is acute in northeastern states, like the Arunachal Pradesh and other states, and also in J&K, where students climb to the top of the hills to attend classes. When I was taking a class in mid-June also in JNU, one of my students was attending the class in his mobile by sitting under a tree in UP when the outside temperature was around 40 degrees. I am saying about the June last year. I must say that. And when I asked the student why, because he told me that this is the only way out I can access the class. Otherwise, I can't access. So that's the kind of, I gave some anecdotes or some instances, but you will get several such instances in the country. I must say that these are not the cases that we can ignore by considering them as very specific. Rather, there are several such cases which are unnoticed. Similarly, the discussion should not be limited to the access of gadgets and internet. The focus should also be on coping of students to the digital technology. It's not about giving them gadget and internet will solve the problem. Whether they are getting anything out of those kind of classes is another interesting thing you should come out. there is a high chance that student who will not be able to cope up with digital learning will be dropped out. And who all falls in this trap, I think you know better that the students from marginalized sections of the society, they will be dropped out because they may not cope up with the digital technology. I want to highlight a story. I don't think I have a time, otherwise I would have highlighted. If time comes, I will highlight that. But let me say, digital divide is one side of the story, but there are several serious challenges when we try to substitute the classroom teaching with ICT. Though that is the ultimate thing that is available to us, we are doing that. But beyond COVID, if we see those kind of policies that I think NEP 2020 is trying to emphasize, it's a serious challenge in the Indian context. Because why I say so, I'm getting into that. University or any higher education institutions, colleges, that is considered as an egalitarian space. That is would be questioned further if we take what we call this online classes, or if you adopt technology very drastically. Students consider campus as a unique learning space. Staying in the hostel, interacting with peers in the dhabas, or interacting with peers in the library canteen, or inside the library, or in the reading room, wherever they sit, many folds they are learning, and getting out of the hostel actually stops their learning for many students, because peer group interaction plays a critical role in learning. Students from poor households and first generation learners or marginalized sections of the society, they suffer the most in this process, as staying at home put them in difficulty to learn. Each teaching through online is an answer to this? I don't think that is the answer. Several students from poor families and first generation learners get access to education with the exception that they will learn a lot from their peers. They get into higher education institutions with the expectation that they will learn a lot in the classroom. They will learn a lot from their peers, from their interaction with the teachers physically. Campus, that's the reason, campus, even college campuses or university campuses, plays a critical role in building their social and cultural capital. You cannot ignore the learning that happens in the campus or dhabas or in any other places outside the campus or outside the classroom. Outside the classroom, that helps them in the labor market as well. They build the confidence that actually helps them to perform better in the labor market. Through online class, that may not happen. The policy suggests to establish National Educational Technology Forum, NETF, to foster the use of technology in education. Given the basic problem we face, are we going to succeed this kind of online learning and all that? You know better. There are several problems to that. Let me get into my final issue, which is on funding. That would be my final issue on this, because that is an area that I am quite interested. India's experience so far in several policies on education, 66, 86, 9, that was defined in also modified in 1992, clearly reveals implementation gap. Several important recommendations that are made, but those are not being implemented. I just wish to mention one that is often quoted in the critical policy discussion, that is the target of spending 6% of GDP on education. It remains unfulfilled in India, even though it was recommended in the Education Commission report in 1966 and reiterated in the policy on 1986. There will be several such examples, but one is 6% of GDP. The public spending on education has been and continues to be declined. And also, once declining, and in the other side, we have a hot debate in this, in the academia and policy space. No doubt, to maintain higher education as an egalitarian space, or to increase the inequality in educational opportunity, there is no alternative to public investment in education, because it is a critical investment, even because it is a critical investment in human development or human capital. That is already being emphasized in the policy document itself also. But what we see that whether we are going to achieve that. The policy has taken several bold moves that we need huge public investment in education. Some of these include universalization of school education, that is needed huge investment. Achieving 100% GER in preschool, that needs again investment. Preschool to secondary level by 2030. Ensuring adequate number of teachers in schools to impart quality education. Aims for achieving 50% of GER in higher education. All that needs money. Huge public investment. NEP 2020 recognizes the importance of public education system and targets to spend 6% of GDP. To provide quality school and higher education, particularly higher education, to the bottom line, that is the marginalized sections of the society, there is a need to achieve this target at the earliest. Otherwise, it's very difficult. But currently, we spend less than 4% of GDP. Our target is 6% of GDP. The public spending on university and higher education sector is only about 0.57% of GDP on higher education. Some have raised concerns whether 6% would be enough to achieve the set targets, but I would say it's not. But at least the target of 6% of GDP should be fulfilled. At least. We can think more afterwards. Now the question is when the target is going to be when the target is going to be achieved. In the recent budget, if you see, there's a decline in the public investment in public education, both in school level and higher level. The situation is getting worse amid the COVID-19 pandemic because the economic slowdown where the tax to GDP ratio is declining and major government spending is on health sector. Government strategy on this, both center and state, is not clear yet. Even in the center budget, we see a decline. Even if there are several rounds of discussion by the Ministry of Education on policy documents, even PM, where the PM has also spoken on this, the funding issue is not discussed in detail. How committed is the this? That is not discussed in detail. The financial commitment of the government is not very clear to implement the policy recommendations, which is need of the hour. Else, several targets that are made to be achieved in the policy document may not happen. There will be a strong implementation gap in that until and unless we do that. Because if there is no fund, then it's difficult to implement several strong, bold steps that the policy has taken up. My final point on this issue is that to achieve several targets in the policy document, the policy NEP 2020 seeks the support from private philanthropic activity in the education sector, which is little new. That was being suppressed, but that now has come up very clearly that there should be private philanthropy contribution, which is minimal in the current context, very less, but it has given emphasis. How to revive this? Because that is being dying. The philanthropy contribution is dying because education from philanthropy to profit. Education has shifted philanthropy to profit. That's the reason there are several higher education institutions in the private mode or self-financing mode. In this 21st century, where education is considered like any other marketable commodity, that's the reason philanthropy contribution has declined drastically. And the intervention of the for-profit sector is growing rapidly. It's difficult to generate resources through philanthropy. That's the kind of point I am saying in the current context. There is a need of policy orientation towards that. I don't see any strategy on place on this from government side. Even in the implementation part, what they are trying to do, I am not sure, but in the current moment, it's not there. How we are going to create a platform for this? More importantly, philanthropy contribution, if any, should be considered as complementary to public funding rather than a substitute. I want to say very clearly that even if you are getting for philanthropic mode of this, it's really important to see that should not considered as a substitute, rather that should be considered as a complementary. Because what happens, government that takes that as a supplementary, and then there will be more of private entrepreneurs, they will come in and invest in higher education. Thank you. I highlighted some of the things, but given the time concerns, I minimized my focus to some of the issues. There are several other interesting issues, but as there will be a Q&A, question and answer, so I may focus or I may reflect on some of the other issues in that time. Thank you. Over to the organizer. Thank you.
Students, if you have any questions towards the session, you can ask them through the chat box so that our session head will be answering to it. You can type the question. Students, I repeat, if you have any doubts, you can just type your questions in the type box so that our session head will go through and answer it. Students, I repeat, if you have any doubts, you can just type your questions in the type box so that our session head will go through and answer it. Yes, I repeat, if you have any doubts, you can just type your questions in the type box so that our session will go through and answer it. Yes, I repeat, if you have any doubts, you can just type your questions in the type box so that
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Hi, madam. Hello.
Sir? Yes, sir.
I have one question. Pradeep sir, I have one question.
Yes.
Actually, in India, you see a lot of variations are there in lower Indian education institution, like private institutions and the government institutions. Lot of variations are there. In
Yes.
Government college only for funding from the public fund. So everyone knows. And the private institutions, the students are giving fees, and the institution also giving some fund to raise the education and develop education. So a lot of gaps are there in private sector and government institution, education institution. The students, why the students, the poor student or urban student or rural student not going to join the government college? That is one question. And another question is, some students are going to join the private institutions. So what is the difference between two systems, education systems, the best in the government or best in the private? So I want to know this question's answer, sir.
Yeah, should I reply or I will get some more questions and then reply?
Yeah, okay.
Is there any other?
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Suresh Kumar speaking.
Yeah.
Sir, after this new education policy, I think we have the education hierarchy, like we have government universities, we have UGC, AICT, bodies are there, and we have deemed universities, affiliated colleges, like that. This is our education structure, right? So this new education policy will have any impact on this hierarchy? What way it will impact the education sector?
Can you repeat, sir? What way will it
After implementation of NEP, will it have any impact on the hierarchy of the education system in our country? Like we have deemed universities, government universities, affiliated colleges, all this. Will it have any impact on our institutions? If it have, what type of impact will it have?
Okay.
Saudhaji,
Yes, sir. Should I respond?
sir, I wanted to know what is going to be the impact of this NEP 2020 on arts and science colleges in India.
Okay. Okay, so let me respond to these three, then I can collect one more questions.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me start with what Rajesh told. Yeah, there is some background noise. Can we? So, what I'm trying to say, the choice of students to government and private is there are two things. This Indian higher education system, like Indian parents are little peculiar. What happens in the Indian education system? That the parents, they prefer to send their children to private school, but once they pass class 12, the same parents will prefer to send their children to government higher education institutions, because they see that private schools provide better quality school education. There they have money and spend and all, and that once they are passing from schooling system class 12, then their focus will immediately shift to public, let's say government. That includes IITs, central universities, IIMs, NITs, because they are better. These are the elite for higher education institutions. So what happens in the choice process? Parents, they send the private school, but have government higher education institution. That's point number one. And what happens actually, there is a clear inequality in the choice. The people or the parents who send their offspring or their children to private schools, they are the rich one largely. And once they get better school education system, they have a higher chance that they will get into government. On the other side, they also spend a lot on coaching. For example, IIT. To get into IIT, you need to write IIT JEE. Similarly, to get into MBBS course, you need to write NEET. So these entrance examinations are too competitive, you know all. So that needs huge pre-investment on coaching and all that. And who all can do that? Again, the parents of rich family households, they will do that. So the kind of inequality is very clear. From there, they are getting good quality school education. Then they are investing a lot on preparing their students. Then they are getting into higher education institutions. So that's the regime. What happening actually, the early elites who are able to get into the higher education institutions, the elite one, like IIT, they are getting. And very less from low and low income group are happening. Middle class, they are either in the public elite or mainly they are into the private. So I think if I have understood rightly, Rajesh, what I'm trying to say that this choice is a complex process, but what I understand, this is the situation now emerging. I'm not saying that you will not get students from marginalized sections in IIT. You will get, but number is very less. It's not increasing very rapid. Because given the competition that is happening, they are not able to compete. Because it's not, even if some parents are spending, like let's say the middle income group or low middle income parents, they are spending a bit on coaching, they are still not succeeding because there is a need of social and cultural capital to compete. Because this the writing IIT JEE writing exam is not 1-2 hours matter. It may be 1 hours matter in the exam, but actually that's the kind of response you will get into, the kind of questions you are getting in objective and all that needs critical thinking. How you will expect that there will be critical thinking of a child whose parents are not first generation learners or may not be having enough money to invest and all? There may be exceptions, but largely you can't see. That's the point. That's the problem. And what happens actually, as I said, why there is a choice for private is largely because there is an increasing social demand for higher education that we all know. Because there are more secondary graduates are coming in, so that is actually leading towards more what you call secondary graduates. They are aspiring for higher education. Once they are aspiring, they are not getting into elite government one, so they are getting into private, because private now everywhere. For example, engineering, you may not need any score as such. Any score, you sit just only in the entrance exam. Even you are not sitting in the entrance exam, some colleges are ready to take it. That's the situation. Because they have seats, there is no demand, so they are getting in. So that's the kind of picture that is being emerged. The other thing that Sir told about institution policy impact on private, government, and deemed universities and all that, there will be different impacts. What we expect actually, there is a huge commercialization of the education, higher education, particularly professional engineering and technical education. There is a huge commercialization. Almost now entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs who are investing in education, they are thinking it's a good opportunity to make profit. Though in what we call, in principle, we are saying as the opening of institutions is not for profit, but it's largely for profit. This is the dilemma. So what do? They are doing commercialization. The NEP 2020 has said about curbing commercialization, but how we are going to do it is an important point. We are not succeeding on this, even if AICT has said many times on this. MCI is putting some obstructions, but that is not happening. There is a huge expansion of private sector, and they are getting their benefits. I see this as in a different context. What I see, this is a political game almost. What I see, the studies that I have done in this area, I see that most of the engineering colleges, even medical colleges, those are there in states, several states. Most of them are in southern region, including Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Puducherry, and all. So Telangana, and what they are actually, most of the colleges, they are being established either by political people or by some of the relatives of the political people. So that actually creates them that gives a strength that even if we do commercialize and all, it is not going to close, or the government may not take very strong step against us, because our representatives are there in the parliament or in the assembly. So they may not bring a policy that will actually curb the commercialization. That kind of political game is happening, and we are trapped into that. I see that we are trapped into that, and it's very difficult to minimize that. But I see what I see that I expect that NEP should strongly recommend for low commercialization of higher education, or minimizing commercialization of higher education sector. That's the point I am trying to say. There should be strict regulation. Well, regulatory bodies are there. We are trying to bring in, but that is not happening. There is a strong, there may be a clear diagnosis of the issue. Some of the issues are very clear. One I just said about the political game that is going on, but how that is going to be tackled is an interesting issue. But surprisingly, if you see NEP 2020, several of the recommendations that it has made, it is giving emphasis on privatism, including private schools, private higher education institutions. So that will lead to inequality in educational opportunity further. So that's the kind of thing that we are expecting through the implementation. But the exactly opposite should happen. There should be real, what you call, to make education as an egalitarian space, like all should get into the higher education system, even the Dalits, even the marginalized sections of the society. There must be, I would say, there must be public investment in higher education, which is not happening. Even in this budget also didn't see any improvement in, rather it declined the budget. I'm getting into the third one, how it is impacting on art science college in India. Actually, this NEP 2020 has brought a very interesting point, sir. That is integrating or bringing liberal arts into the picture. It is saying there will be in the line of IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, it is going to establish some institutions which are called Indian Institute of Liberal Arts, IILA, Indian Institute of Liberal Arts. So that is actually may help to nurture the liberal arts or social science or humanity or language course properly. That is the expectation, I think, being a social scientist. So I expect that that is an interesting stuff, and that should be taken up very seriously in the policy document. Because our understanding on social science or even humanities, language is very not up to the mark. Because these are very advanced level in many other countries, but we are not able to do that. So to do that very clearly, we need policy focus. And I hope this policy, with emphasis on multidisciplinary research, multidisciplinary teaching, emphasizing on liberal arts would help us in that way. Thank you again. I will get some other questions, then I will respond.
Any questions we have, students?
Yeah, students should come out with questions. Anything that comes to mind is welcome. And if you know Tamil, you can ask in Tamil and you can translate, madam. That is also all right. Because I don't know Tamil, unfortunately.
But I am there. I will support with you. I will teach with you Tamil. Don't worry.
Yeah. So you ask them in Tamil, then you translate.
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir.
What of translation?
So let's proceed to further, sir. I believe there is no other questions left out in the comment box.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir. Indeed, it's really a very great research you've done in topic, sir. It's really helpful. You also currently done a SWOT analysis. You just explained all the pitfalls whatever we are facing right now in higher education policy, sir. Okay, so National Education Policy 2020 is an attempt to address most of the grievances of the education system, I guess, which have been pending for decades. This is certainly a historic moment for all of the stakeholders involved, I believe. Maybe it is a teacher or a student or a parent. It is an interview to see how the norms of the policy will be implemented. But we can be sure that this is a new age for the Indian education landscape, and we believe the progressive will see in a course of time. So really, it's a very good speech, sir. Now I call Dr. J. Suresh Kumar, Department of Commerce Professor, to deliver a vote of thanks, sir.
Thank you, madam. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks on this great occasion. I take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to our college management, our President sir, Secretary sir, and Joint Secretary sir for their constant support and motivation. It's my pleasure to thank our beloved Principal, Dr. V. Nagajodi sir, for his constant motivation, commendable support for conducting this webinar successfully. I would like to thank our Vice Principal, Dr. N. Sujata Madam, for her constant support and motivation. It's my pleasure to thank our Chief Guest and Resource Person, Dr. Pradeep Kumar Chaudhary, Zahir Hussain Center for Education Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, who immediately accepted our invitation to be a resource person for today's webinar. So really, we acquired lots of inputs about NEP, and definitely it is an eye-opener for all participants. Really, we got lots and lots of insights with respect to NEP. So thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation, and the way you presented really motivated and encouraged us to do a lot of research. Definitely, if you have done lots of research, then only it will be possible for a person to deliver such a wonderful presentation, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank Mr. Balaji, Systems Manager and PRO, for his technical support. Last but not least, it's my pleasure to thank all faculty members of this institution and participants for all other institutions and students for their wonderful support. Once again, I thank all for attending this program and make it a grand success. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, madam. Over to you.
I sincerely thank all the faculty of the college, faculty, staff, and others for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir.
I hope I will meet you all in some other time.
Definitely, sir. Definitely we will meet again after some days. In some other occasion, definitely we will invite you for some other program also, sir.
Yeah,
we
it
will support in future also, sir.
Yeah, after COVID, we can meet physically also sometime,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and let us see. Thank you.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Before proceeding to national anthem, I would like to inform to the students that there is a feedback link in the comment section box. You can just fill up the feedback link so that you can get your certification also. You can also share your experience about this webinar to our session head through the feedback link. Okay, students. Thank you, sir. Let's proceed to national anthem.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was-
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे गाहे तव शुभ आशीष माहे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank
Okay,
you, sir.
thank you. Yeah, can I leave now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Thank you.
sir.
Bye.